What's going on, y'all? It's utxjgthedon, and I have someone very special here. I actually didn't think I would be speaking to an actual CEO of an esports company. This is very exciting. I'm definitely excited to talk to you, get your insights from your position because it's something that I have never done before. So I'm definitely very interested to hear your thoughts. But let me go ahead and introduce my guest. This is Mark Elfenbein. Am I saying that correct? I just want to make
Yep,
sure.
pretty close.
Is Elfenbein?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So this is Mark. So you are actually the CEO of X1 Esports. So this is very exciting. Let me go ahead and just start from the beginning, not even just from the esports aspect, but Mark as a human being. I want to start from the very beginning. Can you tell me a little bit and tell the audience a little bit about your life? If you were interested in video games as a kid, you played video games. What were you interested in? Leading all the way up to the CEO of X1E.
Yeah, no, sounds great, and thanks for having me today. Yeah, so, I've really been, in the entertainment industry and, call it emerging tech space, I would say my entire career. Started actually in the music industry, where my family I'm Canadian, and my family started a music company in Canada, which was called K-Tel at the time, and that company grew to be the largest music compilation company worldwide, where traditionally you'd have to buy a music album and it was one artist. And they came up with the idea, hey, why don't we put an album together where you can get like your 10 most favorite artists and their best songs on one album, and kind of popularized that whole concept. And that grew into be a global worldwide company. So I kind of grew up in that environment dealing with music companies and music artists and retailers. And that kind of transitioned me into the entertainment space, and where obviously gaming is relatively adjacent to the music industry. So spent a lot of time in the music industry. Personally won some Billboard Music Awards and was a Grammy voting member. And then I co-founded, actually transitioned out of the music industry and just co-founded a gaming company even before X1, which is my current company. And this would have been kind of the mid 2000s or so, where I co founded a video game company that was called Fun Technologies at the time. And that became a publicly traded company. And we were really effectively a holding company of different esports, mobile gaming companies, and fantasy sports companies. And so one of our holdings at the time, which was one of the very early esport businesses, was called worldwinner.com, which still exists today, where you can compete for cash and prizes playing more casual games like puzzle games. And however, the participation in that category is very extensive, way into the millions. We ended up growing that business to be about a $80 million revenue business. And then it was acquired actually by a big entertainment company in the US called Liberty Media, which owned like DirecTV and a lot of other big companies. And they bought our company about 3 or 4 years into this. And yeah, so that's kind of how I rolled into the video game industry through that experience.
Wow. So that's a lot. So you've had experience dealing with other companies, but you started with music. So
Yeah.
that's definitely interesting. Started with music. So how did X1 Esports end up getting into the position to acquire Tyrus, which is a more of a management agency type of company for content creators, Shift, RLE, and Octane? How did that come about?
Yeah. So, X1 launched probably about a year and a half ago. The first company that X1 acquired was actually an esport company, which was called Rix, which operates, some different esport teams in Europe. And then after that, and just based on our background of rolling up multiple companies into more of a larger gaming portfolio companies, we thought there were a lot of interesting under the radar assets kind of popping up in the video game industry. And as probably you're aware, really the growth and kind of the element that fueled the major surge in gaming over the pandemic was kind of the growth of the content creators during that period of time that were very tied into the gaming community, where you would get experts in different video games providing their tips, how to play the games better. And they really aggregated huge audiences, which propelled the entire video game industry, which was probably like $120 billion industry just before COVID, to be like $180 billion industry just 2 years later. So 50% growth in the video game industry. So we're looking at this saying, hey, there's lots of interesting niches in the video game space that would be very interesting for us to participate in. So looking at that, we got introduced to a talent management company called Tyrus. Since then, we've renamed it X1 Talent. But Tyrus basically has a roster of 70 different content creators, all tied into gaming. So you have maybe one expert in Minecraft, one in Grand Theft Auto, and different niches. They individually have huge audiences, maybe in the millions of followers on YouTube or TikTok or Twitch or Instagram. And we just saw this category as what's really moving the needle in the video game space. And the other interesting thing is that a lot of the big brands out there are really clamoring for these content creators to get access to their audiences because they want to introduce their products to Gen Z users, and kind of working with the video game content creators is probably one of the most effective ways to do that. So we, as a company, we went out, we raised some money, we went public on the Canadian Stock Exchange with X1. We actually trade under the ticker symbol of XONE on the Canadian Securities Exchange. So we are a public company as well there. And with that money, we went out to set up some acquisitions, one being Tyrus, which is the influencer management firm that you're talking about. In the case of Tyrus, they work with very large brands like Warner Brothers and Amazon and Hewlett Packard and Best Buy and Capital One that want to really introduce their products and services to Gen Z users through content creators and gaming. So that's what's happening there. Aside from that, we also really start seeing the trends in the video game Rocket League, which has become a very popular esport, has over 80 million monthly players. And we found this one community online that was called Shift. And Shift, if you go to Twitter, it's under Shift RLE, but they're really providing all the breaking news for the Rocket League esports. So if there's transactions happening, roster moves in Rocket League, they are really first, almost like an ESPN, but specifically for Rocket League. And we saw their numbers growing quite a bit. We saw the participation in Rocket League growing quite a bit. So we made a decision that we wanted to be very involved specifically in the Rocket League area. So we acquired the Shift business a little bit after that. And this has all happened in the past few months, actually. Just after the acquisition of Shift, we acquired a company called Octane, which basically is the statistical platform for Rocket League. So they have all the historical data on what players have done, what teams have done, and almost like, kind of segueing into like a fantasy sport kind of a product for Rocket League. So we feel combining these assets into one destination for Rocket League fans would be very interesting for the market and has never been done yet. So that would be just a little bit of background on those few acquisitions.
That's nice. So you basically acquired a bunch of different companies in three different spaces to become basically like an all-in-one type of esports company, not just dealing with, hey, like I'm playing League of Legends and I have a team for that, or I'm playing Rocket League, and I have a team for that. But you literally acquired a company that knows all about Rocket League and is providing the news. So that's basically like the news for that specific sport too. So I like that. That's dope. That's
Yeah,
dope.
yeah. And so like if you want to get like, highlights, if you want to look at the other cool thing we're going to be developing is like an NFL Red Zone for Rocket League, which is a pretty cool product if you ever watch NFL Red Zone for NFL, which really grew the sport quite a bit. So these are some of our aspirations in that sport.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Let me give you a tough question here. Now, as a CEO, one of the things that we see too often is not just with video games, it's really with everything. Sometimes the CEOs lose a little bit of touch as to what's going on at the ground level. Now, you mentioning that you started off with music and then moving more into the entertainment space and with video games. Do you feel like you understand gaming culture as it is today, especially with Gen Z, which is a totally different beast than me? I'm a millennial, so gaming has changed a lot since I've been small because I started gaming when I was like 4. So gaming has definitely changed a lot. But do you feel like you understand the gaming culture now and what people actually like and how we operate our lingo and stuff like that?
Well, I think I'd be lying if I said I was absolutely fully entrenched and fully understanding on the day-to-day trends that are happening in the Gen Z gaming space. But one thing that I have done, and I've done this kind of throughout my career, is I'm always on the ground. So I'm not, you have some CEOs that kind of sit up high and they have people run different parts and they kind of cut off communication from parts of their business and really the whole culture of the space. I'm almost the opposite. We have a very flat structure. I'm constantly engaging with almost every employee in our company every week. So we're not that big of a company. We maybe have 40 to 45 people where I am able to actually have conversations and basically talk to everybody almost every week. So I'm really participating in all the company meetings as it relates to what's happening in the market, what's happening with customers, trends. And then I'm personally actually doing a lot of those roles as well. So I'm out there reaching out to partners, customers, working on product development. So I have my hands kind of in at all levels to some extent, just because that's the kind of person that I am, versus other kinds of leaders out there that maybe want to be focused on more of the outside part of the company as opposed to the inside part of the company. So just being that entrenched and having communication open, where at any point anybody's able to talk to me in real time, and that I find is really helpful, especially in a space like gaming that we know is moving incredibly fast and month to month is changing. So yeah, that's kind of how I treat it.
Now that's amazing. That's amazing. I think that that's what you're doing right now is the really the it should be the blueprint, honestly. What a CEO is. Especially like you mentioned in the gaming space, where this is totally different than say you're the CEO of a department store or something like that, where you really need to focus on the money aspects and making sure that your board is satisfied or whatever. But the CEO is definitely important. In the video game space to be able to talk to, the people that run each individual aspect and make sure that you know what's going on, like who's getting acquired and things like that. So that's
Yeah,
dope.
and
I
one
like
one way we'll do that is that we will run offsites with each of our divisions every couple months at most, where everybody's involved. So we'll run through the whole business, see how we're doing in the marketplace, look at what our opportunities are, look at our SWOT analysis. But we don't just work with the high top managers, it's everybody in the company has a voice. So we want to hear everybody's opinion. Everybody's opinion gets onto the whiteboard and everything is looked at. So everybody has an equal voice at our meetings as we're evolving and kind of doing the planning for our businesses.
good, good. I like that. Keep doing that. Keep doing that. I hope that you
We'll
all
try.
thrive. Continuing with that motto. All right. So let's talk about how gaming is like you mentioned before. It's getting super big, and I don't think that the gaming market is ever going to slow down. But why do you think that gaming is getting so big that it's really at a point where it might even surpass like actual national sports like the NFL and NBA? Like we've been seeing some crazy numbers for events like League of Legends, Rocket League, Overwatch, and like that. So why do you think that gaming has become so popular that it might end up surpassing like traditional sports?
Yeah, so there's a couple things, and obviously the numbers don't lie, right? So I was just looking at a stat today where it showed the whole sports industry and it folded in esports to the entire sports global industry. And if you look at the 13 to 17-year-old demographic, esports is the most participated in sport out of all the pro sports for that age demographic of 13 to 17. And that's really the key demographic because that kind of shows you where things are going to be in 10 to 20 years. Whereas if you went back 20 years ago, esports would have been minuscule, relatively minuscule in that 13 to 17-year-old demographic. And most kids at that point were probably playing traditional sports. And now, kind of what I feel is that if you talk to a teenager and ask them what they're doing with their pastime, like half of them, their number one pastime is playing video games, and that would have never been the case a long time ago. So in esports or video games, I think the playing field is really leveled out. Whereas when you deal with traditional sports, different groups are more benefited, I would say, based on their economic background, where they live, and other factors probably impact what they can accomplish. Whereas in the esport world, video game space, I think that that playing field is really leveled. So you can be participating with anybody around the world, almost in any type of a situation, which has really opened it up to some extent. And then the stats that I've heard is that by the year 2030, it looks like the esport industry will be about a $10 billion industry. And for context, the NBA is probably a little bit smaller than that currently, and the NHL is probably about half that size. So it's very logical that the growth we're seeing in esports, there will be an inflection point about 2030, where maybe after NFL, esports would be the next biggest kind of grossing sport out there, I would say, when you look at all the pro sports. And that's, I think that's just what's happening in the market right now.
Wow, wow, yeah. Just thinking about that is mind blowing. Especially, like you mentioned, this wouldn't happen, 20 years ago. I remember when esports really became popular, and there was a lot of pushback because they had sport at the end of esport. They're like, well, it's not a traditional sport. You can't. You're not physical with these sports, and all of a sudden, you look 5, 10 years down the line, and you have, like China and Japan creating arenas just for esports. Like that is just unheard of. Like you create arenas for traditional sports, the NFLs, the NBAs, and
Mhm.
stuff like that, but for esports, that's just crazy. And you're seeing the turnout happen. Obviously, Corona has derailed things just a little bit, but we're slowly kind of getting back on track to being able to physically be in these spaces and see these things happen. So yeah, it's very interesting to see the later generations really embrace video games, and it really like gets so popular to the point where you have millennials and older generation. They're like, what is this? What is Twitch? What are you playing? Is that Fortnite? Like it's very interesting to see
And the
that
funny
shift.
thing is, like, if you are like a game like Rocket League, for example, a kid can play it, but their grandparent can watch it, because
Yeah,
watching Rocket League is like watching any sport, like the excitement, the back and forth. It's just like you're watching an actual game. The last 2 minutes of an NBA game is kind of like what Rocket League is. So it's really opened up quite a bit. There's over 3.5 billion people, I think they said, now that are playing video games. So half the planet is playing games. Whereas, back in the day, it would have been a very young demographic, like a small sliver. They're building like a dedicated arena in Las Vegas, I think, which is about to open up. And obviously, we know the viewership of League of Legends Championship is on par with the Super Bowl. So you can kind of see the numbers growing.
yeah. Speaking of the playing fields, I know that things are slowly getting better, but how do you feel about diversity in gaming? Specifically when it comes to what you're seeing as far as who are on these esports teams, because I'm still looking and it looks like really only the NBA 2K league really sees a lot of diversity, because I know there are a lot of people that look like me. They love playing basketball and they love playing 2K, but we still don't seem to be invading those spaces like with Fortnite and League of Legends and Rocket League. So do you feel like things are balanced, or they're getting there, or do you feel like it's still unbalanced? You're still seeing a lot more, Caucasian people who are mainly Caucasian men who are, joining these teams and getting in these spaces.
Well, I think it's different based on where in the world you are. So we have North America, and then we have everything outside of North America. So I believe out of North America, things are probably dispersed a lot more equitably. In North America, you're probably going to see a bit more of a bias to the Caucasian men's side of things. And that's always going to evolve maybe a little bit slower than the rest of the world, I think, probably just for anything. Um, But like there, obviously in the esport competitive space, you have, as you mentioned, I think kind of, some of those challenges. Video games at large, though, just people playing games is very diverse because just based on the sheer numbers of, billions of people playing with low barriers all over the world. So there's those that can be good, kind of get onto teams and maybe have some advantages that get them onto the teams. It's a little bit more diverse outside, I think, of North America. The one thing, though, is that talking about diversity, I still think the characters in games are not very diverse. Like you're still looking at more of a male Caucasian kind of a figure that's not representative of the playership, I think, at large globally. So there's a lot of catch up to do there. In our case, like we actually, interestingly, the acquisitions we made of the companies we talked about, one is the principal is African American of the Rocket League business, and the CEO of the influence agency is female. So you can kind of see this, there's some steps being taken there, but there is quite a lot ways to go. And I think specifically for the characters in the games, there's some catch up there for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it does seem like, and again, since we're in North America, that's what we see more, and yeah, it's definitely a lot more Caucasian males. But yeah, I do agree that if you look outside of the U.S. or North America, it's a little bit more dispersed. But I have been seeing like a lot more female only teams that have been doing their own
Yeah.
thing, and slowly but surely, I think more like for individual type games. Like I know that the FGC, the fighting game community, they are very diverse, and that's what I tend to
Mhm.
gravitate towards the most. Even though I suck at fighting games because I don't have the time for it, but I'm so in tune with the FGC, so I know that they're very diverse. It's definitely a lot more. You see pretty much everybody there, and then you
It's
see
quite almost like
travel
think
stuff.
about where was traditional sports 40 years ago, right? Like look
Mm,
at who was involved in traditional sports. Look at kind of where it's at right now. There's been quite a lot of shifts there, and then I think esports is kind of trailing that, and will look a lot differently down the road, hopefully.
yeah, sure. All right. So, what is the hardest thing about being the CEO of an esports team?
Well, and keep in mind that in our case, we have esports teams, we have traditional video game assets like the Rocket League assets, and we have an agency side and probably other assets that are coming. So I think just being like, not missing what's happening in the marketplaces because we have different diverse entities. So you can't just track one business. It's like 3 to 5 different companies and businesses that you have to be really entrenched with and tracking in real time. So I think that probably is one of the biggest things. Um, as it relates to esports, I think that the trends are shifting very quickly. We see some gravitation to the mobile side of things, which wasn't around previously. VR is coming into play, at some point here as well. So things that were games that were popular 2 to 3 years ago, as an example, that had huge market share may not even be around like today or in 2 to 3 years from now as well. So I think just kind of looking at those trends and being very good at maybe predicting where the market is going is a very major challenge. Um, and then also just kind of going back to what I had mentioned previously, being entrenched with everybody in the organizations at all levels and not growing so quickly that you can't do that anymore is also very important, at least to somebody like me. So those are a couple of the things that I'm always looking at and just trying to stay relevant out there.
Awesome, awesome. So I see that you're definitely a stats guy. You like looking at trends and whatnot. Which social media platform do you feel has the most room to grow for gaming? Specifically talking about TikTok, Instagram. Even you can even throw in Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. Which platform do you feel like has the most room to grow?
Yeah, I don't know. Twitch has a little bit of a monopoly right now. I think just in terms of esports. But yeah, and obviously there's the social media platforms, but then like where are people playing games, I think, as we move forward, like what is that platform? North America, it's very tied into, console and PC, as we know. The real growth for the industry is on mobile. So I was just at the Esport Business Summit in Las Vegas, and everybody's talking about, where the next couple 100 million global players going to come from. And really it's international through mobile, because that's really the medium that the rest of the world is operating on. So in terms of where growth is happening, that's really what I'm looking at, especially in the esport category. I think a lot of it's going to come from the mobile side, in a lot of different parts of the geography where they're not really using kind of more the stationary, traditional types of platforms. And another trend that I'm really seeing is that the VR space is moving very quickly, I think. Whereas people look at it and it's kind of cute today to some extent, and it's, early adopter maybe. But there's a pretty cool NFL game. I don't know if you've seen the one. There's like the game where you're like an NFL quarterback now,
I've-
um, that you can play. And just going back to the thing that you said previously, where like esports not a physical sport. Well, now it is, because through VR, it actually captures your body, your actual body movement. So just to think about that, right now you could simulate being a quarterback in an actual game. If you have a 10 by 10-foot area, you can play the whole game as a quarterback now with an Oculus. And so, and I just saw somebody just put out like last week complete body tracking. It was like, and I guess it was in maybe in China, but it's something to go on your hands, ankles, and head, where it actually completely simulates your movements in those games. So as I'm looking at this right now, I could see you playing a traditional sport as we know it, football, baseball, literally in your home, and you don't have to be live actually. So like for this not to happen in the next 10 to 20 years would really surprise me if that wasn't the case.
yeah, VR has been a very interesting thing. I remember when the HTC Vive came out, it was pretty hype, but one of the big things for that one was the price point. That HTC Vive was very expensive, so that automatically turned a lot of people off. You also had to have a pretty powerful PC in order to fully run it. So that was two barriers right there that a lot of people were
Yeah.
like, no, I can't do this. PSVR, we had that. Not too many people got on it. Now we're trying with the VR2. The Oculus originally came out. Not too many people hopped on it, but now we have the new Oculus, and this seems to be the one so far. It's cheap. You don't really need anything powerful to run it, and a lot more people ended up trying it out, and they like it. People my age, people younger, like they end up wanting to try it out. It kind of reminds me of like when the Wii came out. And you've seen a
Mhm.
lot of like older people, like they were like, "Oh, like Wii Sports, I like that. Like I want to play that. That looks fun."
You can play
I think,
golfing with Wii Sports. Yeah, I
yeah,
think that was the first introduction of kind of motion control, I guess, was with the Wii Sports. That
yeah,
was the first evolution of this.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree 100%. I guess it'll be interesting, like, where you're still at the tip of the iceberg, I think, with VR at this point, but you can already see where it's going. So I could only imagine in 10 years from now what's going to be possible and how cool that experience is going to be.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So let's get off of the business side for Mark. Mark, as a human being, when he is done for the day, which you're probably never done, you're probably busy all day. But what do you like doing outside of gaming and entertainment? What are some of the things that Mark likes?
Well, as you can imagine, a lot of it is kind of related to that. So we talked a little bit how I kind of came up in the music industry. So I'm a big music guy. I still have a lot of, favorite artists, and I'm always like discovering new music out there. I think one thing that really helps me also is just kind of like physical activity. So I like a lot of recreational activity, physical activity. It's very easy nowadays to kind of get up and kind of plop yourself in front of your computer and get a whole day done before you know what's happened and not really move too much. So for me, I really advocate starting your day with something physical. So I will get up pretty early in the morning. I will go to the gym, try to get a workout in for 45 minutes to an hour. It actually, I find it really kind of clears your head up really well. It actually gives you more performance to do other things when you could do something physical. So I really advocate for that, and I think it's just very helpful and healthy. And then I'm really into a lot of different, pro sports as well. I love, the NFL. I'm in Minneapolis, so I'm a big, Minnesota Vikings fan. I'm also Canadian, so as you could imagine, I'm a big hockey fan, and I really track that sport and kind of just, play it for fun. But yeah, those are some of the areas that I'm involved with. A lot of just, physical sports and physical activity in general.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Final question for you. I don't want to take too much of your time. 5, 10 years down the line, what would you like to see for X1 Esports? And I'll give you actually another side of that question. Where do you see esports as a whole in another 5 to 10 years? Besides what you said, possibly surpassing, like the NFL and revenue. But where do you see X1 in 5 to 10 years, and where do you see esports as a whole 5 to 10?
Well, the esports space and the video game space, I think is really evolving. I think the really cool thing is that brands right now that want to gain access to younger demographic, they need to have a gaming strategy. Like you can't be successful as any brand out there or almost any product and service without addressing the gaming community. So I think that because of that trend, that's exactly where we are positioning ourselves right now with a stable of gamers, esport teams, content creators, where we kind of are kind of that connector where brands can communicate and gain access to a Gen Z audience, through these various arms of gaming to the point where every strategy is going to have to integrate this, and we're at the at the cross section, and that's kind of how we see things evolving. It's almost like where a lot of the pro sports were in the early 1980s. They were getting a lot of traction, a lot of audience. The revenue models had not caught up quite by that point. But now, 20 years past that, 10 years past it, the revenue models really caught up to make those really thriving types of areas. And that's kind of what I see happening in the esports space and how we play in that area.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, so I'm definitely looking forward to what you all will do in the future. I'm looking forward to see how esports will be in the future, because I think that when, because I don't think it's an if, I think it's a when esports, actually surpasses, traditional sports like the NFL, because that's the big dog in North America. But when that
Mhm.
passes the NFL in revenue, it's going to be very interesting to see, even if the NFL, tries to shift their business model. I mean, the NFL does a lot. They have their hands in everything as well, but I think you just can't stop the behemoth, which is esports and gaming. Like it's just really a freight train that's just going to keep going and going and going. And it's going to be, interesting to see like if anyone will be able to stop it. I don't think they will, unless something crazy happens and like we all lose electricity, or something something crazy like that happens. But I don't know. But it's very interesting. I really love the space that we're in, and I'm excited to see what happens in the future.
Yeah, I mean, gaming is effectively recession proof, right? Because if you're hunkering down at home, you're gaming. If things are doing well, there's new technologies, new platforms coming out that you want to invest to, and the whole space is advancing. So it's the best industry out there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that has been the hardest thing podcast with JG. This has been Mark. Any final words, Mark, that you want to tell the people?
No, just great. Talking to everybody. If you want to track what X1 is doing, we have our website, which is just x1ent.com. Also on Twitter, and look forward to talking to you again shortly.
Absolutely, absolutely. With that being said, this has been the hardest thing podcast. JG. This is Mark. You all for the next episode. Peace.